Okay, I think we can get started. Again, welcome to this week's office hours for ESG and ESG-CV. My name is LaQuantia Goodman, and I am today's moderator. If you are just joining us, please go to the chat and introduce yourself with your name and the region you represent. As a reminder, this office hour session is being recorded for public record. Office hours recordings are on the HCD ESG webpage under Technical Assistance and Training. A copy of the slide deck and recording will also be emailed to you by your grant administrator or annual representative. Next slide. How to ask a question. All questions must be submitted in the chat box. Please type your organization and question into the chat box. The team will read questions out loud at the end of the presentation and will provide answers, if possible, throughout the presentation. All questions and answers entered in the chat box will be recorded as part of the public record. Alongside our presenters, we also have several HCD staff, including ESG representatives, ESG CV grant administrators, and other consultants who are able to answer questions during the question and answer session. Today's office hours session will include the following: ESG and ESG CV updates, office hours updates, upcoming trainings, ESG and ESG CV question and answers, and our spotlight session on duplication of benefits. I'll now pass to Sarah for the ESG updates. Okay, I think Sarah might be having some difficulties, so I'll go ahead and start these updates. 2021 standard agreements. If you have been awarded homelessness prevention funding and you have not turned in your updated policies and procedures for HCD to review and approve, please do not forget to do so by December 15th, 2022. Please remember, HCD will not reimburse any HP expense until this process has been completed. To avoid recapture, 20% expenditure milestone deadline is 120 days from the execution date. If your contract has been executed and you need help navigating the eCivis system to complete your RFFs or to add additional people from your agency to manage the award, please reach out to ESG NOFA at hcd.ca.gov and we will provide TA for you. Next slide. Avoid receiving standard 209s and reimbursement delays. All 2021 contracts are managed in eCivis. All requests for funds must be submitted through eCivis by clicking the Financial Report tab. Please do not email these requests to your representatives. Every request for funds must also include a completed detailed expense report. HCD is conducting mini monitoring for every reimbursement request. This will include anywhere from 3 to 4 lines chosen by your HCD representative and will also include complete client files if requesting reimbursement for rapid rehousing and/or homelessness prevention expenses. Reminder, all supporting documentation must be redacted and submitted through the secure SharePoint site. Please do not upload the documentation in eCivis, as noted in the HCD's PII policy. Be sure to have your supporting documentation ready to submit when requested from your HCD representative. 2022 applications. The ESG team is currently reviewing the BOS competitive applications. All COC/AE applications have been reviewed. All BOS non-competitive applications must have been reviewed. ESG representatives have sent all applications that need corrections back for draft. If you need help or clarification on corrections, please submit or please reach out to esgnofa@hcd.ca.gov. Reminder, you cannot add additional people from your organization to the View Application Award until a contract has been executed. Next slide. Just that one, I'm sorry, Helena. This slide contains your ESG policy documents. Please remember that this will go out in the presentation, the slide deck presentation, so you can access those as needed. Next slide. And if you need to contact your ESG team representative, this slide contains their email addresses. Please reach out to your ESG representative listed above or contact us at esgnofa@hcd.ca.gov. And now for our ESG CV updates. Remember, our 75% expenditure milestone deadline is for January 31st, 2023. All ESG CV grantees must have expended at least 75% of their total award. Requests for funds, your RFF or financial reports with the actuals must be submitted no later than January 31st, 2023. This does not include accruals. Reminders for performance milestones. All program funds for projects, street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, all shall be expended by September 30th, 2023. All funds for HMIS and administrative costs shall be expended by October 31st, 2023. All final RFFs shall be submitted to the department by November 15th, 2023. Please remember that HCD is asking for success stories. HCD is collecting success stories for the ESG CV grant. If you have a success story from one of your providers or programs that you would like to share, please email it to your grant administrator. Please remember to redact all PII in that submission. Listed below are our upcoming office hours. Please note that due to the holiday, we will not have office hours on December 21st and December 28th. We will resume with our office hours on January 4th, but then we'll resume with our Spotlight series on February 1st. Please notice the training websites below. They will also be dropped in the chat for your convenience. Next slide. This slide includes our COVID response resources, so feel free to access those whenever needed. Next slide. And next, our MPOX resources. Please access those as needed as well. And lastly, our ESG resource links are provided for your access as well. Do we have any questions right now? Okay. Next slide. If at any point you have any further questions, please reach out to your annual ESG representative as communicated at esgnofa@hcd.ca.gov or reach out to your ESG CV grant administrator. Let's now turn our attention to Mr. Chris Andrews as he provides duplication of benefits overview.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining this morning. We are going to take a little bit of time to talk about duplication of benefits. It's a topic that we've spent some time previously reviewing, but given all of the milestones, where everyone is in their program, it's a really good time to come back and check in on DOB and what is required to make sure that you're complying with duplication of benefits. We're going to do a pretty quick overview. I want to make sure that we leave time for your questions. If you have specifics, hopefully we'll be able to dive into that here. And if not, we can follow up offline and make sure that we're getting your questions answered. So to begin, what is duplication of benefits and when does it occur? It occurs when the entity, be it the program participant or the service provider, is receiving financial assistance from multiple sources, be it federal, be it state, be it local, for the same purpose, and that total assistance received for that purpose is more than the total need for assistance. So now let's pause on that and kind of talk about what DOB isn't, right? So there's the term same purpose there. So if you are a provider getting funding for rapid rehousing to be paying for your financial assistance, and then you're getting a separate stream of funding to be paying for case management or type of wraparound services, there may be overlap in terms of the client that you're serving, but there is not overlap there in the purpose of this funding, right? One is being used for your case management or your wraparound services, and the other is being used for your financial assistance. So that would not be an instance where we would be thinking about DOB. DOB is really when we're looking at money coming in from multiple entities, again, going to be it federal, be it local, be it state, and that money is being used for the same purpose. And then a DOB exists if you're getting more money than you need. Next slide. Want to just touch on the enabling legislation that goes into kind of our need for DOB. Beginning with the ESG program and the Hearth Act, the CARES Act requires that ESG CV comply with DOB requirements, and then DOB itself is defined in the Stafford Act and the Disaster Recovery Reform Act in 84 FR 288-36. We won't get into the specifics of what is and is not required, but happy to make available kind of summaries of each of those legislations if folks are interested. Another piece of enabling legislation for duplication of benefits is within 2 CFR 200, right? Where as a grantee, as a subrecipient, as a provider, you are responsible for ensuring that all costs are reasonable and all costs are necessary. And that is a component of DOB, right? DOB, if there's a duplication, that is not a necessary cost, that's not a reasonable cost. So it also falls into what we're following every day in how we're implementing our HUD programming. Next slide. And as grantees and subrecipients, as providers within the ESG CV program, everyone at the state and at the subrecipient level are required to adopt and follow their duplication of benefits policies and procedures, ensuring that DOB is not incurring at the activity level, at the level of street outreach, at the level of shelter, and also not at the program participant or beneficiary level. Next slide. And so who are the players and who's involved as we think about DOB? Beginning with HCD. HCD is responsible for ensuring at a program-wide level, duplication of benefits is not occurring. And so in every agreement that's executed by HCD, there's a clause ensuring that DOB is protected. At the subrecipient, at the continuum of care level, responsible for adopting DOB policies and procedures. This HCD has created a template that you can use, a sample that you can use for your own policies and procedures, and making sure you're applying that to your programs. And then at the provider level, operating under the requirements that are set forth by the subrecipient. And it's really important by the subrecipient. because the subrecipient may choose to do DOB a little bit differently than what HCD is requiring. They may have more documentation requirements, more standards than what the template is and the standard that is set by HCD, and the provider needs to operate under those requirements. Next slide. And so what are the requirements for subrecipients? One, conducting the monitoring of your service providers, making sure through desk monitoring, through on-site monitoring, through reviewing invoices, that DOB is not occurring, that you can be confident that DOB is not occurring within your programs. And then, as required by HCD, reporting of duplication of benefits and reporting the actions that you took to respond or to mitigate any duplication of benefits that occurred. And then, most importantly, is just documenting, making sure that you are documenting in your program files, in your client files, in all the financial transactions, being able to show and document that duplication of benefits is not occurring, and making sure that you are maintaining that paper trail to show that DOB is not happening. Next slide. So I'm going to start to talk at what are the requirements of DOB kind of as set in the HCD policy. And again, you may have a subrecipient, you may have a COC that has a little bit of a different DOB policy. So make sure that you're operating within that policy. There are two different levels of DOB analysis: activity level and program participant level. For most of what is carried out under ESGCV, HCD is only requiring that you document DOB at the activity level. So for emergency shelter or temporary shelter or street outreach, not documenting that anyone who is benefiting from street outreach or benefiting from shelter is achieving or receiving a duplication of benefits, but only showing at that activity. So that provider is not having a duplication of benefits for carrying out street outreach. They're not getting multiple funding streams that are providing for the same service, and that service is greater than the level of need. For rapid rehousing and homeless prevention, the responsibility of DOB analysis is at the activity level and also at the program participant level. If a program participant is receiving financial assistance, security deposit, rental assistance, arrears payments, whatever it may be, documenting that program participant is not receiving a duplication of benefits, is not receiving multiple funding for the same need or same purpose, and that is exceeding what they need for assistance. And then for HMIS and administration, again, doing that documentation at the activity level, that the funding that is being provided is matching the need that is there. And if there are multiple funding streams coming in, that they are not exceeding the need that exists. So we'll talk at a broad level about the different steps of DOB analysis, and then we'll look at an activity level example and a program participant level example. It's a four-step process. One, determining what the need is. What is the amount of need? What's the total cost of need for that activity, for street outreach? Or what is that total need for the program participant? Verifying other awards and what the use of those awards. What was that funding earmarked for? What was it intended for? If there's other assistance coming in. And from there, calculating the unmet needs, saying the total need was X, other funding that was addressing that same need was Y. Therefore, the unmet need is step one minus step two, to determine the unmet need, to determine what ESGCV can be allocated for. And then step four, again, documenting that process, making sure that you're maintaining adequate documentation and supporting documentation of each of those steps that you go through. I think, as we hear these 4 steps, you're thinking about your program and you're thinking, gosh, we've always done this in a way. And I think everyone has who's operated within a COC or ESG program has followed this process, and they just haven't called it DOB. And the important thing here is that you are just making sure you've got the documentation to support that thought process that you have most likely always been doing. Next slide. So at the activity level, when you're determining that total amount of need for the activity, you can do that a couple of different ways. You can determine it and say the need for our service area, for our COC geography, for street outreach, for shelter, for whatever it may be, is X amount. And you can make that determination based off of your by name list, by kind of recent counts that you've conducted, whatever past need that you've identified. However you want to justify that need, and that need may change over time. You may think that it was X and it may grow to be Y. You can also choose to determine the total amount of need for each activity, for each provider. You then are determining what is all of the assistance, what's all the funding that's coming in for that same activity. So if you're looking at street outreach with one provider, is that provider receiving or using other funding? Are they using PLHA dollars? Are they using local money? What else are they using to be funding their street outreach activities? And making sure that you're documenting kind of what that other funding coming in is. And then from there, determining your maximum level of award or determining your unmet need. Those are one and the same. And so being able to calculate the total amount of need minus other assistance for the same purpose, for the same use, and then being able to calculate your maximum level of award. And then again, from there, going through the documentation process. So we can look at an example, and if we're looking at an example of a shelter with monthly operating costs of $10,000, we're looking at using ESG CV money for a 1-year period, a total need of $120,000, monthly essential service costs being $6,000 a month, or $72,000. So we're looking at a total of $192,000. Determining other assistance in the application process. You should be asking your providers to be reporting, what other funding do they have for those same services that they're carrying out. And in this case, the applicant reported $40,000 from a local foundation for case management. So the total need, if we can go back. So again, your total need equals $192,000. Your other assistance equals $40,000. Your unmet need would be 192 minus 40,000. You'd be looking at a maximum level of award of 152,000. And then you want to document that process. Now, before we jump to the next slide, I want to just stay here kind of in determining that assistance, right? We're beginning by looking at a snapshot in time of what other funding do you have coming into your program, but we all know that can change over time, right? It may begin as 40,000, it may go up to 80,000, it may go down, there may be another funding stream that comes in. And so part of that obligation of the subrecipient for ESG CV is to ensure that service providers are reporting as the other forms of assistance coming in are changing and evolving, and making sure that then you're documenting and redocumenting your DOB analysis to make sure that you're not in a position where you have more money going into the program than what your need actually is. Next slide. So your program participant level analysis, again, this may be different, based on a subrecipient policy, but from HCD's template, it is only applicable when financial assistance is being provided for housing relocation or stabilization services, right? Anything under 576-105A, with the flexibilities allowed under the CARES Act. And again, you're determining the total amount of need for each ESG CV funded cost type. So you're only doing the assessment for the same cost types as the ESG CV funded activity. So if you are only paying rent going forward and you're using another funding stream for security deposit or arrears or utility, you don't need to evaluate security deposit or arrears or utility. You're only evaluating the cost types that ESG CV is being used for. And again, you determine your assistance, you calculate your maximum level of award, and then you document your DOB analysis. All right, next slide. Oh, sorry. Where are we? Yes. So within that process, generally you want to be certifying that DOB is not going to occur somehow through the intake or the application process. And I think this is a place in your intake documentation, in your application documentation, that you want to make your DOB request for information as simple and clear as you can. And I think HCD, and I think Aaron just posted the link, provides a good template. Right, DOB sounds really complicated. There's a lot of enabling legislation attached to it. And so I think it can be overwhelming. It can be, creating more stress than what is needed for a potential client whom you're serving. And so you want to make sure that you are kind of collecting that data kind of in the intake process, but doing it kind of in as simple of a way as you can. Where you also want to make sure that you're documenting and explaining DOB is to your landlord or the property manager who you're actually paying, right? No money is actually going to the client. It's all being passed through to the utility provider, to the landlord or the property manager, and making sure that they understand the DOB requirements and repayment provisions, that if they're being paid twice for the same month, that they are responsible for repaying their ESG CV portion. Again, that should be something that you have in your existing program, lease agreements and rental agreements that you have with landlords, but want to make sure that you're documenting that here. So here, looking at assessing need, monthly rent, $2,500 over a year is $30,000. Determining if there's any other assistance. The applicant reported that they received $1,000 from a local faith-based group for security deposit assistance. You're then going to calculate what your maximum level of award is. The total need is $30,000. And other assistance being received, in this case, is actually zero, right? You are only paying the rent. You're not paying the security deposit. And so you're only looking at that cost type of rent. You will want to document that that $1,000 went from another entity to paying security deposit, but it doesn't factor into what your maximum level of award is. And with that, that is a 15-minute kind of overview of DOB, and want to hold time now to dive into questions that you all have as you're thinking about your programs.
Please don't be shy. Feel free to unmute yourselves and raise your hand and ask your question or drop it in the chat so that we can answer.
Yeah, I think one of the things, just as we're kind of waiting for folks to be thinking about questions that has come up in different monitorings and in different conversations with grantees across the country, is needing to document that no DOB occurred, even if you're very confident and certain that no DOB occurred, especially at the activity level, right? For street outreach or paying for a shelter program, you still need to do that documentation, even if you are confident that there's no DOB or that you can't really see that there could be a scenario in which DOB would be occurring. You need to make sure that you're keeping that documentation in your file.
Does anyone might have any questions in regards to the duplication of benefits, in regards to monitoring that you're currently having or think you might have?
I have a question for Chris Andrews. One, I'm glad that you brought up monitoring, because we have monitored a handful of subrecipients so far, and we have noticed that the majority so far either don't have DOB policies and procedures, or if they do have them, they're not necessarily doing that analysis at the participant level. If, going forward, if they don't have that, if they've already made the payment but didn't do a DOB analysis, is it appropriate for them to go and like backdate an analysis form so that at least when it comes time to monitoring, they can show that, even though maybe we didn't do it at the time it was paid, we realized that we should have been. And so we want to make sure that there's something, documented. I don't know if that would allow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you would want to go back and do that evaluation if you didn't, in anticipation of a monitoring, also in going through your cleanup of files, right, and making sure that you've got everything you need. As we all in our programs on occasion, we'll go back and double check: do we have it? Have we done our checklist? Are we following everything we need to be doing? You would want to make sure that you have that DOB documentation. And making sure that you're keeping that. It looks like we got a question from Pam. If a client is wanting assistance with rapid rehousing and is in a TAMF program, is that DOB? So again, potentially, likely not, right? I think it is only if you are seeing, that they are getting funding assistance for the same purposes, and depending on what, your different funding streams are paying for, that you could, not be operating within a DOB scenario. I do think within ESG CV, the same rule of ESG applies, that you can't have multiple funding streams paying rent. So you do need to stay within that rule. But just having two funding programs in and of itself doesn't constitute DOB.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thank you, Chris, for that overview of duplication of benefits. Thank you for all of the staff that have helped in and pitched out today. And thank you to everyone for your questions. Please note that a quick survey will launch as you exit this session. Please take a minute to reply, as we are always striving for ways to provide useful content to you all. Thank you for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day.